Hello and welcome to Non-Duality Part 2. This one is going to be on spiritual teaching. And let me recap Part 1. We talked about the difference between a full actual self-realization, enlightenment, if you will, versus what a lot of people are calling awakening, which is maybe a one-time event or a several-time event where they've had visions or they've had experiences such as Kundalini or an ayahuasca event or something that happened that they claim sort of awakened them. Keep in mind, from the perspective of someone who's fully enlightened, this is still part of the everyday dream state. And what they mean by dream is not specifically a dream, but comparing it to when you're sleeping, everything seems real. And then when you wake up from that in the morning, you recognize that it wasn't. The events happened, but it wasn't actually a part of a reality. So, and this is how things are looked at from a fully enlightened point of view. Now, of course, this creates a huge abyss, and partially why non-duality is not all that popular, because it's one of the hardest things for anyone in the spiritual community to accept, that they actually have to give up who they think they are to make that shift. And it's a shift that once you make it, you don't go back. It's not a gradual, happens every couple months thing. It happens all at once, and you shift to a different perspective. You recognize that you are a vessel for streaming consciousness, all the things that they talk about, the bliss, the peacefulness, the love, the pure love and compassion. That streaming consciousness runs through you and runs through all of us. We are shrouded from seeing that based on our already previous ideas that we are individual souls, individual consciousnesses, rather than one streaming conscious that goes into everything. Okay, so that's quite a hard pill for most people to swallow, which is why there are not that many actually fully enlightened people. So that brings us to, well, what are all these gurus and these teachers and these so-called spiritual leaders doing in this world? And you'll notice that most of that teaching is, number one, most of it's for money, but not without its, I guess you could say, not without its desire to help you improve yourself. But remember, we're still talking about improving who you are or growing spiritually in some way within the dream state. So there's not an end to it as far as following a spiritual teacher, because in fact, the whole process of becoming fully enlightened doesn't have anything to do with the person. It's one of the drawbacks that some say, who are fully enlightened, that they didn't recognize, was that it's not an experience, because once it happens, you don't even see yourself as a person anymore. You don't see your own individual self. You're looking beyond. You look so far within that you look beyond, and you see the consciousness there, and you recognize that you and everything else is part of that and is that. But of course, as a person, you can't say I had this experience, because they don't recognize that there is a person there. Okay? So, that being the case, when people follow spiritual teachers, I know they have good intentions, and they're hoping to advance themselves spiritually, maybe learn a few things like meditation or things that they think will get them closer to that point, but still in that process of thinking they're in control of it. They can do something to make it happen. And this is all part of how we think as human beings in our individual state, is that we think that we can affect things by doing things to affect them. And that is not a perspective of an enlightened person. So this is partially why it's so hard for them to communicate with us. We are, speaking in dualistic terms. Everything is dualistic on this plane of existence as we see it. But a fully enlightened person sees it completely differently. And if you were to ask them, are you fully enlightened? Well, they wouldn't even understand that question. I mean, they would understand it from the perspective, yeah, I remember when I was a human, I asked that. But that question would be immaterial because they're not a person. So they didn't experience anything. So, and I know this is a big abyss, and it's probably why most people can't get to that place of enlightenment, because they only can understand it from a cognitive point of view. They can't actually experience it themselves, and they never will. It happens or it doesn't happen. Now, obviously, there are things that you can do that maybe could bring you closer to that happening. But as I said, a lot of these talks were inspired by David Karst, and he had no knowledge of any of this before it happened. He wasn't someone who, I mean, he studied comparative religions. He did a lot of those things too, but that's not what happened for him. He recognized very quickly that he had nothing to do with it. It would be sort of a grace thing, but he didn't have anything to do with it. The one thing I think that anybody can do as a human being, if they really want to go that route, because I'll tell you, it's a vast change, and you would be in a very, very small minority should you choose to even want to be in that path. But one thing about his book that I think that a lot of teachers don't do, especially enlightened masters, because it's a confusing communication gap between us and them. One thing he does do in that book is he allows you to envision it. In other words, you can't fully grasp it, and you're not going to unless you flip over, but you can envision at least envision what it would be like. Imagine yourself as a vessel rather than a person, and you have a mind, and you have these biological functions, and you do things, but you're not actually the person doing it, because there is no person and there is no doing. You're just functioning in the moment, no past, no future. You're just functioning. I think he explains that there isn't even a evolutionary piece to this. It's just now and pow and go, and it's on, and all the things you think you can control, you can't control. They come at you. There's not a sense of what you there's a balance, okay? And the balance causes us to think that we can change the balance, but we really can't change the balance. So when you look around in the world and you see good things and bad things happening, you can make changes in yourself. You can learn to accept things more. You can do some things to better maybe understand in a cognitive way what is going on with an enlightened person, but you're not going to change that balance, okay? So I guess what I would say, as far as teachers go, if you want to gain yourself some more knowledge, cognitive knowledge, knowledge in the mind. This isn't really knowing like an enlightened person might consider knowing. It is more, it's all in the mind. Just as your conditioning and your beliefs, which are taught, and you use them to function in your life, and any of the knowledge that you gain is all head knowledge. It's not an actual knowing. And I hope you can understand what the difference is there. For me, when I look at this, and I'm not an enlightened person, but when I look at it, I can imagine the whole idea that everything that we think would have to give way, which means you as a person would give way and basically obliterate what you think of as your own life in order to be able to see things from what would be the proper perspective or the enlightened perspective. It's a complete shift change. And of course, that requires more of someone in terms of their belief system than most of us are willing to do. Most of us have opinions, beliefs, ideas, and we have a set way of doing things, and we think that we're controlling things, and very hard for us to even imagine the possibility that we are this all-powerful, just vast compassion, love, peace, streaming force or consciousness, if you will, that goes into all things. I kind of almost wonder, when you're touched, in the heart by certain things that you see, and you get emotional about them. I kind of see that as the sort of a little ringing and a little connection to this. For example, if you've ever seen something like a video or something where I saw one not too long ago where a colorblind man was given as a gift for his birthday this pair of glasses that actually enables you for the first time in your life to see color. And this gentleman was in his 60s and had always been colorblind, not just the mild colorblind, but not able to see any colors, just shades. And he put them on, and he was overwhelmed, and it's a very emotional video, and he starts crying, and it can't help but touch you deeply, and it's like you understand, because now you see what he's looking at from an entire perspective that we all see that he's never seen. And in a way, it like opens you up to it, and you can see yourself in him. And if you can do that, then you can also understand that there may be a perspective that is out there that you don't even see. And maybe you could start to picture how incredibly profound that might be. Anyway, this is part 2, and I will have more parts up and coming. Hey, thanks for watching.